Or is it? Because it's only stupid if you think the war on drugs is really about class. But if you think that, you're not paying attention, because the Centers for Disease Control, the National Institutes on Drug Abuse, every study you choose to consult without exception will indicate to you that white folks are over 70% of all the illegal drug users in this country. Black folks are only 13%, Latinos 11%. So you put those folks of color together, 24% of the users, but they are 90% of the people getting locked down for a simple possession offense. White folks, over 70% of the users, less than 10% of the people being locked down. Why isn't that being discussed? Because to talk about that would be to play the race card. It would be divisive. It might even be anti-American. To criticize and to say that America is institutionally racist in its justice system, you can't say that. You can't say that the system is racist. You can't say it if you're Pastor Jeremiah Wright at Trinity United Church of Christ in Chicago. You can't say it no matter who you are, because that makes you unpatriotic. That makes you America-hating in a time of terror. We're supposed to wrap ourselves in the flag and pat ourselves on the back. And God forbid you don't have that view of America. God forbid, see, white folks are waking up today seeing that footage of Jeremiah Wright and coming to realize that black people don't see the world the way that we do. And we're shocked by it. We have not been paying attention. We think everybody else sees our country the way we see our country. The way that the world sees the country we think is the way we see. How can we not have learned by now that most of the world doesn't see us the way we see us? And for people of color in this country to view the world, as James Baldwin said, for black people to view the world the way that white people do, for black people to have this John Wayne imagery of the United States would be a sign of mental illness. And so we're stunned, but we make it where Senator Obama can't talk about this. Can't talk about it. He has to transcend race. The problem with this, I want to leave you with this before we begin the dialogue piece of it, is that when we have this silence imposed by the system on those who want to be president, where they can't even talk about the things they know. Look, the things I just said to you, Senator Obama knows these things. His advisors know these things. Senator Clinton's advisors know these things. None of them can talk about them. Because to do so is to create division, and we're trying to be all about unity. But see, we can't have unity if we don't have truth. We can't have unity if that unity is prefaced on either a lie or a partial and only an incomplete truth at best. And when we have this silence imposed, when we don't speak out against it, when we don't raise our voice to change that culture so that candidates can tell the truth without getting in trouble for it, then we just get more of the same. And then we lament it every 4 years, how the politicians all lie. Politicians don't tell the truth because nobody's making them tell the truth. The culture is not requiring of them a higher degree of honesty. That's up to us. That's not really up to them. And when we have that silence, it feeds white denial. And I got to tell you, that's a monster that does not need to be fed any more than it already has been. Because a few years ago, a survey was taken where they asked white folks, do you believe that racism and discrimination against people of color are still significant national problems? And only 6% of us, 6 out of 100 said yes. I'll have you compare that with a survey taken 3 years earlier in which 12% of white folks said we believed there was a fairly good chance that Elvis Presley might still be alive. I don't know how good you are at math. It's not my strong suit, but that's a ratio that I can actually calculate. What that means is that white folks are twice as likely to believe that Elvis might actually still be alive than we are to believe what people of color tell us they experience on a regular basis. That is denial so profound as to boggle the imagination. But here's the even more boggling piece. It isn't new. See, it's one thing in the modern era, this place that we call the post-civil rights era, a horrible term, but the term that we use. It's one thing for young people who are white, let's say in this era, to believe that racism has been conquered, because they can turn on the TV and see all this pop culture iconography and imagery of transformation. We can see Jay-Z has a Amex commercial, right? We can see that Oprah is so wealthy, she can buy every single one of us and give us out free to her audience members for like a week. And we think that means something. And folks will say it. They'll say, what about Oprah? What about Obama? What about Tiger Woods? What about Condoleezza Rice? What about Colin Powell? Yeah, and what about the fact that you can name all the exceptions on like 2 hands? Because when you can name all the powerful people of color, who are contradictions to the general rule of white privilege and white supremacy, you know the rule stands. When you can name the exceptions, that's not power. If we were to have a day where we were talking about all the powerful white people in America, I hope y'all don't have a job to go to, because we'd be here a long damn time. We'd be here long just trying to figure out all the names. See, that's real power when you don't even know where they're at. Right? If I can name all the powerful people, that's not power, because if I can name them, I can find them. See? But if I don't even know your name, that is power right there. I don't even know where to look for you. I know you're up there, right, running something, but I have no clue where. That's power. So people are in denial now. I get it. I understand it. But here's the deep thing. It's not just new. It's not just in the post-civil rights era. It's not something that's the result of being in this sort of MTV pop culture generation. Go back to the early 1960s. This lets you know just what kind of state we are in and have been in for a long time. Because if you go back to 1963, if I were to ask anybody in this room or anybody out there on the street, do you believe that 1963 was a year in which black folks had equal opportunity in your community? In retrospect, we would all say no. We would say, well, of course not, man. That was before the Civil Rights Act. It was before the Voting Rights Act. It was before the Fair Housing Act. We know it wasn't equal then. In 45 years, in retrospect, there's no sweat off our back to acknowledge how bad it was. No big deal. Oh, it was terrible back in the day. Oh, my goodness, yes. But in 1963, at the time, when the Gallup organization went out and asked white folks that very question, do you believe that black folks are treated equally in your community with regard to jobs, housing, education? Now, in retrospect, we all know the answer. But in 1963, what do you think, white Americans? Every bit as rational as white Americans today, some of our parents and grandparents, what do you think? They said 7 out of 10 said yes, that people of color were treated fully equally. And in 1962, 87% of white folks, when asked, do you think black children have equal educational opportunity? 87% said yes. In 1962, which is to say that in 1963, when that March on Washington happened, not only were most white people not there, a lot of white folks will tell you they were, right? There were only 200,000 people total, so very few, actually, were in attendance. Not only were most white folks not in attendance, most white folks didn't understand the point. And by our own admission, we're essentially saying, what is all the fuss? What is all this, I have a dream? Dream about what? Look around you, everything is peachy. Nothing to see here. 1963, 1962. Go back and look at what whites were saying about racism in the 30s. Nothing. 1890s, nothing. 1850s, nothing. Now, there were always exceptions. There were always white folks who stood as allies with people of color, but by and large, the white community has been in denial in every generation. Here's my question for you. What does it say that the dominant group in every generation, that white Americans in every generation have said there wasn't a problem, and every time we've said it, we've been wrong? And what does it say that in every generation, black and brown folks have said there is a problem, and every single time they've been right? What it means is that in order to believe that racism is not really a significant problem, the way that apparently most white folks in this country feel, not the ones in this room, but white folks generally, you would have to believe that white folks who haven't been right yet, that our irrationality has converted to insight. And then black and brown folks who've never been wrong once have suddenly lost their flippin' minds and can't interpret their own reality. Do we not understand how racist that assumption is, how racist that denial is? Because it amounts to me saying, I know your reality better than you know your reality, so trust me and not your lying eyes. You are not rational enough. You are not together enough. You are not emotionally stable enough, potentially intellectual enough to know what's happening to you. So let me tell you, for you, what's happening to you. It's arrogant, it's dismissive, and it's fundamentally racist. If we want to know if certain people if racism is still a problem, we need to ask the people who are the targets of it. Just like if you want to know if sexism is happening, don't ask some men. I mean, some of us might know the deal, but only because we chose to listen to women. If you want to know if straight supremacy and heterosexism are problems, don't ask some straight people. If you want to know whether ableism, discrimination against the disabled is a problem, don't ask some able-bodied people. I don't even know how I got into this building today, because I didn't have to pay attention, see? Because I'm temporarily able-bodied, I could just walk on in.